This episode of Now This Is Lit is brought to you by Audible. Check the link in the description to get your first Star Wars audiobook free. Everyone loves free things. Click that link. Do it. A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away. You're listening to Now This Is Lit, a podcast about Star Wars books, the people who make them, and the readers that just can't get enough of them. I'm your host, Meg Dowell. I use she, her pronouns. And today, I have another interview for you. I just, literally minutes ago, just got off of a call with Mark Oshiro because, as you know, if you've listened to the show in the last few weeks, Star Wars Hunter's Battle for the Arena came out on March 7th, the same day as Star Wars Shadow Battle Scars. But, Battle for the Arena is a middle grade book, and sometimes these books just don't get quite as much love as all the other ones. But all Star Wars books are valid, and I was so fortunate to be able to talk with Mark about this book and about their experience writing a Star Wars. Technically another Star Wars, but a whole book-length Star Wars this time. And I hope that you enjoy this interview as much as we enjoyed doing it. Here we go. Mark Oshiro on the show, everybody. So first, we'll start here. Congratulations. You have written a whole Star Wars book. This is so exciting. You did it. How are you? How are you feeling? Are you good? Are you hydrating?
Yes, constantly hydrating all the time. I am. It still kind of doesn't feel real. And I'm looking at my copy and I'm like, that's my name on a book with Star Wars above it. It's very surreal. I'm a lifelong Star Wars fan. I started with the original trilogy. Probably before I even remember it. Return of the Jedi came out about 6 months before I was born. And so my parents it was just always on in our house. So this is, exactly what I've always wanted. I've wanted to do this and it happened. I wrote a Star Wars.
You did it. And you're one of a growing list of authors who has started your Star Wars writing journey with a short story in an official thing. And now you're doing a whole book. I love, there's so many, I love seeing this progression of I'm going to do this tiny little thing that is just as awesome, but just a little bit shorter, a little bit smaller. And then we're here. You've done a whole book. That is so cool.
Yeah, it was it's like the first one was like a Star Battle, and then you graduate to the Star War. And it's great. And it is literally how my editor at Lucasfilm found me, was because of the, certain point of view story I did, which here's the theme of both of these things I've written for Star Wars. I cannot understand how they let me get away with what I write for both of them, because I pitched this ridiculous story about the Wampa for a certain point of view and was like, I want to do a story about Wampa gentrification. And they were like, okay, sure. And I remember turning it in and being like, there's no way they're going to let me do this. And it happened. And that was sort of my experience with this too, where I was like, can I do this? I am fully expecting no's. And here we are. It's magical. It's wonderful.
I mean, sometimes you got to shoot your shot. You just got to be like, can I do it?
Right.
Can I get away with that? But you know what? That story, the short story, is so important though, because now we understand. Now we feel for the Wampa. We get it.
It is the thing that I love about writing fiction too, is I love messy, complicated characters. And even though Wampa is non-human, I loved that idea of, let's take this scene that we understand one way. And it's interesting too, because the idea for it came from an interview Mark Hamill gave years after Return of the Jedi, where he said, I really feel bad about that sequence. And in particular, he's like, I don't think Luke actually would have done that. It was one of the first interviews I remember years ago being where I like that, where the actors could sort of have their opinions on the story and their character. And so I'd always had that idea in my head of there needs to be justice for the Wampas. So when I got this opportunity, I really loved the idea of getting to expand on this and to show, a different side of, this character and this creature who doesn't necessarily get any depth in the movies. And I love, that Lucasfilm was like, go for it. Let's go. let's make you sad about Wampas.
I honestly think about that story quite often. Because that's just the kind of effect it has. You've written the short story, and now you got to do the book. But the book that you got to do,
yes,
called Star Wars Hunters Battle for the Arena, I love that title, was also it's a tie-in, it's a part of a game that's coming out.
Yes.
Which we're all very excited about. But because of this, you got to work with the Lucasfilm Story Group to make sure everything is all connected. You don't have to tell me anything that's super secret that I shouldn't know about, but what was that experience like working with them and kind of,
I don't know that there's anything secret about it, actually. At least with the stuff that I worked on, especially because I would say there would be if the game had not been announced and we had known that this was happening.
Yeah.
But, I remember getting the email. It was late October of 2020 that I got the email from my agent that was like, hey, and I didn't even read it. It was just like, hi, I'm an editor at Lucasfilm. I have a book. And I was like, yes, immediately. I don't need to read yes, 100%. And so what was so fun about it is, I got to speak not only with Story Group, but Boss Alien, who is the creators and the people who are making the game. And it was very much like, this is not necessarily going to be like an IP as you understand it. We have a world, we have characters, we have certain rules, but they let me pitch multiple story ideas. So the plot, they were like, you can do what you want. We want to see what you come up with. And it's interesting because the one that I was the most excited about is the one that we got in the book. I really wanted to do this like ragtag band of misfits, which is one of my favorite tropes of like, here are, a group of people who have nothing in common and should have every reason to hate each other. And how do they become a family? While also pitching this mystery element. I really liked this idea that Reeve had a past. We didn't know what it was. How does that intersect with her journey to try to find herself in this arena? So working with Story Group was great because I also found that writing at Star Wars is very intimidating, especially if you are a super fan, because you want to get things right. Yeah. And what was so comforting about that was just having access to all of the documents about the Star Wars universe, being able to look things up, but also just being able to shoot an email and be like, hey, so, I'm not going to say who's in it because then maybe that's the secret part. I don't know if people know who's in the Story Group, but being able to shoot off emails, being like, can I do this? Is this thing allowed? And in particular, my big thing was my two big things that I wanted to introduce was the stuff with the Force with Reeve and the gunk rock, the music element.
Yes.
I was like, okay, I know music is a huge thing. I grew up in punk rock and hardcore, and I was like, can I create like a version of that in Star Wars? And let me tell you, the Story Group people and some of the Boss Alien people were like, this is unhinged. Please do it. Like, and being met with that energy of like, I don't know how you're going to do it, but yes, absolutely. So, and that's the thing. And I know speaking to some of my friends who are Star Wars authors, like getting to write with Story Group is so magical because it's this group of people who love Star Wars as much as you do and who also know more about it, who just want to encourage you to be creative and find ways to weave in your original ideas with existing canon. So it was amazing. It helped a lot in building like the smaller details of like, okay, I need a drink. I need a metaphor. Like a lot of stuff was like, how do I weave metaphor in? Like you can't say something like, or you could say something like as solid as ice. But I was like, oh, what's a hard substance in Star Wars I haven't thought about? And what would be maybe on Narshada or related to this world? And someone could pull a detail out. And that part was, as a super nerd for Star Wars, like that is the coolest part. Like, so I had an incredible experience and a whole lot more freedom than I expected to.
I just love that they're like, yeah, there are these rules. Here's what you have to, like operate within. But other than that, go do whatever. I just love that.
Yeah, it was incredible.
Yeah, because it allows you to still be creative and tell the story that you want, even if it's in this universe that does have, the edges where you have to there are lines you sort of have to stay in or not. Exactly. You can kind of push the boundaries as much as they'll let you, but I love that.
Part of it too was in earlier drafts was finding that fine line between how much fantasy is it versus how much science fiction, because Star Wars is that fascinating blend of the two of them.
Yeah.
And so how much technology do you rely on? So there was some technology that I got to invent and was like, oh, I would love to have something like this, versus how much of the Force feels like magic and how much do we not want it to feel like magic. So there was a lot of fine tuning in those areas too, which was, until you write a Star Wars, was not a thing that I had necessarily thought about in depth.
Right.
And that was really fascinating as a fan too, was thinking where that line is.
So I wanted to touch on the time period a little bit that the story takes place in. And I realized this when I was I read your book and I was writing my review of it and things like that. And I realized this particular time period, which is between Return of the Jedi, between the fall of the Empire and when we get to everything that happens in the sequel trilogy.
Yeah.
So much of the storytelling that we have in canon for that happens in middle grade books, which I don't know if there's like a reason that is the thing, but so much of it has. There's a whole stack over there. I don't know, but it's really fascinating to me that, it's changing now. Like we got more in The Mandalorian this week, things like that. But so much so far has been in these books, in particular in these middle grade books. Let's talk about middle grade and let's talk about Star Wars, middle grade Star Wars, because one of the reasons you're here is because I was so excited about this book and I wanted it to get, all the love that I think it deserves. Because the thing with middle grade sometimes is it gets love. It gets love from its quote unquote target audience. It gets love from fans, but it's not always at the same level as other books that might come out. And I don't love that. Because I think it should all be the same. And you write YA and middle grade. What makes writing middle grade kind of different from other genres? It is, it's just a classification, but there are differences.
There are. I want to actually start off by saying I have a theory about why so much middle grade happens in that time. For me, middle grade, the joy of writing middle grade is it is this very fascinating transitional period. You are going from young childhood where often you are very certain about. I feel like middle grade is where uncertainty starts to creep into characters' mind for the first time. And you are realizing the world is a lot more complicated than you thought it was. And the beauty of where this book is set is Reeve in particular is coming from one level of certainty. She knew how to operate in her home city, and now she is cast out into chaos. And for a lot of kids in that period, middle school feels like where true chaos starts to come into your life. So I like writing in that sweet spot because I think you can write stories about realizing, to use a very cheesy metaphor, but it works, is that the world is an onion, that the world has layers, and you are now realizing it's not the simplistic item that you thought it was. And so in particular, the challenges are what is considered age appropriate, how much do you show on the page, and the beauty for me, especially working with Story Group and with Luke and my editor Jen Heddle at Lucasfilm, was finding that sweet spot of this is a story about PTSD and trauma. Reeve is this character who had this very traumatic incident happen when she was younger, and now, and I think this is also fascinating too, because this is the first middle grade character I've ever written who is in their 20s, which was an interesting challenge. How much do you lean into that? And so we kind of went with this route of, we're going to write her so that hopefully, kids in that intended age group can relate to that idea of, you are the new kid, you are the new person in a very chaotic situation, you don't know anyone around. And so in that, we were sort of like, what is the headspace of entering middle school for the first time? And while there is no middle school actually in the book, it's all about that mentality. You are the new kid in this new space, you don't know how to interact with anyone. And then stuff starts happening and it's a lot and you don't know how to deal with your emotions. So a whole bunch of Reeve's journey is sort of grafting on to that element of puberty, of all your hormones. You don't understand what's going on, but in this case it's a metaphor, and for her it's her growing force powers and not understanding where this voice is coming from and why it speaks to her only at certain times. And I loved it. I very much got to write this sort of self-loathing, very chaotic, very isolated character. And I was thinking of that specific period of how difficult it is to move from elementary school to middle school. And so I'm hoping that is the thing that kids of the intended age group get from it. But I also see that there is value for people who are older, who can hopefully also see a very relatable journey in Reeve in the struggles that she goes through. So I loved getting to write specifically middle grade as my like first foray into Star Wars books. And you're right. I think I'll say this. I've been doing school visits this year, and I have this whole slide where I'm like, y'all, I wrote a Star Wars, and the middle grade kids go feral because the teacher gets to say, we can actually have this book. A lot of the other ones, if they're Y, particularly your upper Y, they're like, oh, you'll get to it in high school. If you're in an advanced reading level, you can go to it. But the kids having their teachers and librarians be like, yeah, we're going to have this book in the library when it comes out. Like, they're like, wait, what? And then I get to tell them that there's illustrations and that it's over. Like, it's over. So it is something that I'm very happy to get to write, because I think kids of that age group want these kind of stories, especially in this universe.
So you do these school visits and you talk to students and you spend a little bit of time with them. And, as we already kind of talked about, middle grade and YA can, be for all ages. Anyone can appreciate it. Anyone can get things out of it and enjoy it. And I think everyone should. But, there is that intended target audience that really can especially benefit from these stories that are about them and that are that should be stories that they can feel seen in and they can really feel understood. What are some steps that you kind of try to take when you're telling these stories for this audience to kind of really make them feel like, they can see themselves in a story, they can feel things?
Absolutely. I think the biggest thing that, Jen Heddle and I talked about was honesty. And particularly when I had pitched the idea that this was going to be about Reeve's past and this challenge that she was going through. One of the things I loved about working with her is that she very much encouraged, like, dig into these emotions. It's okay. And I love that particularly about my middle grade editors is that they don't want to shy away from things that are difficult. It's all about the balance of figuring out how to talk about it. So how do you talk about someone who's trying to ignore their past, who maybe doesn't like who they are a whole lot because of it? They feel confused and out of place. So, in that sense, I think the biggest thing I worked on was how do you be honest with also not being cruel? I wanted to have people have compassion for Reeve, and maybe they don't understand why she's behaving the way that she does, or they don't relate to it, but they can eventually come to understand why she's reacting the way that she does, why she's so quick to isolate from everyone and doesn't want to make these close friendships. For her, she's the kind of person where the stuff she went through in Corellia because of the Empire, she's very much like, I take care of myself and nothing else. And that is a trauma response. And so how do you write that in a way where you don't want the book to sound like therapy? You don't want it to sound in a way where you're talking down to kids. So you have to meet them on their level, but also be honest. And I feel like that is the guiding force that helped me write this book.
You've written 2 Star Wars technically now. And yeah, so cool. And this one you got to take kind of characters that no one has really gotten to interact with before and kind of introduce all of us to them. If you were to write another Star Wars, and you had the opportunity to write about any character you wanted,
I'm ready.
Who would it be?
I have been yelling about this forever, and it is a dream project that will never happen, but I'm just like, I'm still going to put it out there, which is I want to write a middle grade book, which is a retelling, or at least maybe not a retelling, but from the point of view of the Ewoks in Return of the Jedi. I want their whole story, but only from them. I am obsessed with the Ewoks. I love their culture. I love their place in the movies. I love how much detail George Lucas gave to them in the development of them. And I feel like the Ewoks are severely underrated. And I'm like, what a great vehicle to tell a story about resistance to empires, then through these cute little bear things that are called Ewok. I feel like it's just right there. Hi, everyone. That's the thing I want to write. So that, or I will tell you, I don't talk about it often. I will tell you the character I pitched before the Wampa, which was, oh my God, I had his name right off the tip of my tongue and I lost it. The Winrow Hood, the guy who had the weird ice cream maker thing in Empire. That was my first pitch, and the editor on that project was like, someone claimed it like just before you, and I was like, okay, I got it back. So I'd always wanted to write from Winrow Hood's perspective. But yeah, Ewok, Return of the Jedi, middle grade book. That's my answer.
We talked earlier about shooting your shot. So here we are. Right. You put it into the universe. So who knows? It's going to happen now. And yes, and you and I will remember.
There we go.
That we talked about it. Exactly. And that's what made it happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have so much happening right now. Why don't you talk a little bit about what, Hunters is out, Battle for the Arena is out. What's next? What else do you got going on?
The wild thing is, a weird silver line. I don't even know if I could call it a silver lining, but a silver lining of the pandemic was because we weren't traveling anywhere. I had so much time at home to write. So from January 2020 through the end of 2021, I wrote 5 books.
What?
And all my schedules sort of overlapped on top of one another. And so the end result of that is that from last week until the beginning of May, I have 3 of those books coming out. Oh. And it's just, so, Star Wars Hunters came out on March 7th, which was very exciting. I was actually traveling. I was at a book festival and then I had to go to New York for school visits. So I wasn't home to get my copy of the book. So I found some at a Barnes & Noble in Union Square. And that was my first chance to see the final copy before I got home. So but aside from that, I have my third young adult book is out on March 28th. It's called Into the Light. It is a thriller about 2 boys, a cult, a dead body. It's a beautiful nightmare, and I'm very proud of it. And then my next IP project comes out, which was I got to co-write the next Percy Jackson book with Rick Riordan. You have to understand, I was literally writing or about to start the draft of Battle for the Arena when I got the email from my agent about all of that. And I don't really tell this story publicly either. If you don't know, you have to get your outline approved by Story Group before you start writing. And a lot of the details, and so you're going back and forth. And we had an extra layer of making sure things got approved by Boss Alien because they had their separate set of canon and mechanics of how the game worked that we didn't want the book to also. So I had that very complicated balance. So I had very little time to draft this book. I checked myself into a hotel in Long Island City. And it was during that time that I got the email about the Percy Jackson project. And I wrote the first draft of this book in 5.5 days. Oh. I hope I never do that again. Because I had 2 other books due, one in April and one in May. So I was like, I cannot put this off. I have to do this now. So the first half of this book was written in 5.5 days. It was a fever dream. I don't know how, I still look back on it. And all I did was just order room service every day and then just sit and write for 16 hours a day. It was a wild journey. And so all of this was happening at the same time, but I couldn't talk about any of it. The book had not been announced. That I just got offered the Percy Jackson audition. It was a lot. And so now it's all coming to fruition. I have a lot going on. It's very, very exciting. It's and very surreal. I still can't believe it's all happening.
This is why I asked you at the beginning if you were doing okay.
I'm fine. It's very exciting. It's nice to see all the hard work have this end result. So yes, I'm doing wonderful. I'm thrilled.
I'm so glad. You're doing great. All of these books, I'm going to get them. We're all going to get them. We're all going to love them as much as you do. I'm so excited. I don't know under what circumstances we would talk again, but I feel like we have to. So write another Star Wars, come back. We'll have a great time.
I know. Come on, Lucas. I'm ready. I'm here to write another one. They know. I'm very excited. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for doing this.
Absolutely.
Wasn't that so fun? I had fun. I hope you had fun listening. Don't forget that you can get Star Wars Hunters Battle for the Arena now, wherever you get your Star Wars books. If you want to use our affiliate link to get that, you can, but you don't have to. But I would love it if you did. Thank you all so much for listening, as always. Now This Is Lit is part of the Faraway Fandom Network and is written, produced, hosted, and edited by me. Jose Jimenez designed our podcast art. Keep up with the show on Twitter at Star Wars Lit Pod, and find the show wherever you get your podcasts. If you would like to support the show, there are a lot of ways you can do that. Audible, newsletter, getting this book or other Star Wars books on Bookshop with the affiliate links that I put in the show notes, description, whatever you call it. Supporting the show in any way you can, even if it's just to share or telling your friends about it. It actually does make a difference, and it means that I can keep doing stuff like this. I love talking to authors because I love writing and I love stories, and I love being able to connect with people with my love of creating things, but also our shared love of Star Wars. So I really appreciate that. All the support that you are giving, even just by listening to this, lets me do that and so much more. For more book reviews and Star Wars book celebration, follow Star Wars Book Reviews on Instagram.